signal. We are ready for our last habit, habit 7. Been on a journey for quite some time here. So, what's that?
Is the force still with us?
I think it is. So we've been counting on that force, right? So we should start off with a prayer. So who would like to lead us in prayer? Tom, you want to kick us off?
Okay.
All right.
Lord, we thank you, our Lord, for this opportunity to be together. We ask, Lord, that you would stir in our hearts the wisdom that you want for us to be instilled in our hearts, our minds, and our souls. And we just pray ultimately, Lord, that we would get it, and we would glorify you in all things. Amen.
Amen. All right. And of course, we know when 2 or 3 are gathered, the Spirit's with us, and that's what we are counting on. So it's all about love, right? So think about last time in Habit 6, Synergy, we were trying to tune in then in love to how people are feeling, right? Listening not just with our ears, not just with our eyes, but with our heart. So hopefully as we practice and build a habit, that's just naturally the way people experience us. But it gives us the opportunity to also then build a win-win, right? If we're willing to listen first, seek first to understand, as Covey says, and then be understood, we can always pursue negotiating a win-win, whether it's with our clients, teammates, or at home, right? Wherever we are. This is our opportunity to make this our habit, the way we live, so that we can then stay in problem solving. If we're willing to listen empathically and always pursue win-win, it keeps us in problem solving mode. But if we fall into win-lose, we get into debating, we fall into listening to respond or to win or whatever our motives, what our feelings might be, we can fall into arguing, avoiding. We're human, it happens, so all we have to do then is recognize it and apologize, right? Try to redirect back to problem solving. So if we can build this way of living, right, we're going to be able to bring the kingdom and keep the Spirit with us. So the principles we talked about is the belief that 2 is better than 1, right? If you believe that if you want the job done right, do it yourself, it's not going to be developmentally the way to build our culture. The culture we're trying to build is that we rely on teamwork because that's a better way to work. It's the way God designed it, right? So if we think that way, we live that way, we practice that, we're going to be able then to use all of our resources, and when we don't know what else to do, we can always pray, right? So whatever it is, we can bring about the kingdom in our work. So last time, we said that when we have lots of things on the plate, we do need to prioritize. So we shared with you a prioritization tool, and we brainstormed some kind of important things that we could do to improve on. And we used this tool called Compatibility Matrix to identify where those priorities are and recognize that if we're going to reach our goals as an organization, we've got to solve our Class 5 and our Class 4 problems, which are highlighted there, right? So it's an opportunity to kind of make sure we're focused on the most important things. Since we remember from our time management, there isn't time to do everything, but there's enough time to do what's most important. So we do have to prioritize as we work. So it's all about teamwork, building synergy, right? Synergy, again, can anyone put it in their own words? What's synergy? Who's got a good one for it? Adam?
It's a team working together.
Team working together? Anyone else?
Coming up with better
1 + 1 = 3.
That's right. 1 + 1 = 3. Better ideas, right?
The whole is greater than the individual.
Some of its parts, right. That is the key. So we actually build capacity. So if we don't have all the ideas, we can build new ideas by putting our heads together. So this is what we do if we seek it at home, we seek it at work, then wherever we are, right, we're looking for synergy and inspiration to do that. So our opportunity was to practice this, right? Because that's how we build a habit. And generally it takes how many days to build a habit?
30.
Not 30 days, a month, right? So it takes practicing every day. So I'd like you to grab a partner, do-si-do, look at your action plan now from last time, two weeks ago, and see if you've made any progress on practicing the opportunities for synergy, whether it was at home or work or maybe something else spontaneously that happened. So grab a partner next to you, do-si-dos, and talk it over. See how synergy is becoming a way of life. Ron, we got room for you. John is coming. We need another seat. think?
has to leave.
We're not gonna leave. There's John. There's a chair, so can we set that up more right there? Because that's the only tabletop I think we have.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Over here?
Yeah.
John and Adam can love on each other.
Back here.
Okay. That's what we've done in the
I
past.
said John and Adam can love on each other and make some synergy.
Well, let's see here. Ron, you want to sit on the end here?
That's your opinion.
Nobody cares.
All right, there's your packet here.
Mine's easy.
There you go. All right, so talk it over with neighbor. Did you experience inner synergy? Remember, synergy, you know when you've had it because you feel energy, right? You feel an excitement that something's been created that you didn't have before on your own.
This is, man. We are now procurement meetings on Monday morning. So we're talking to assign and delegate that are upcoming.
All right, so talk over synergy at home, synergy at work that you worked on last week. Did you have any success with that?
Yeah, that's what I was fixing to say. Everybody helping me do that.
So you've been working on your GC, man. Now we're just getting started. Asking what did you do in the last 2 weeks to create synergy? At home or at home or at
We got, just the office.
went to CBC.
Yeah, good trip to Synergy in this house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alex.
Is that a word? Synergy lobby.
It's amazing, one of those trailers.
Yeah, well, I can actually do
That was just.
Keeping you busy.
Okay, as you're talking it over now, how would you know? What would be a sign that there's synergy happening in your home? What would you notice?
My wife is happy.
Yeah, a happy wife means a happy life, right? That's principal or spouse, right? What else would you notice if there's synergy happening in your home?
Somebody else is texting?
That's right. Would you say that?
Less stress.
Less stress, right? Okay, because there's energy pouring in to fill in all the kind of things that drain us, or the challenges of life, right? So you're going to feel more joy, you're going to feel that spirit. How about at work here? If we have synergy here, what would you notice different? What would be changing?
Productivity.
Productivity would increase, right? What else, Tom?
Yeah, that's all.
Productivity, okay, good. What else?
Wouldn't have any more work to do.
Work's all done, feet up. Well, actually, we'll be talking about that today. When we are actually able to be more productive, we can reinvest that time in continuous improvement. So there'll never be a missed opportunity to put our time to good use, right? So we notice that positive things happen when we have synergy, right? But the most important thing that we'll notice, and we mentioned, is relationships, right? When there's synergy, relationships feel the benefit of win-win, right? They feel the sense of mutual benefit, right? That everyone's respected, everyone's ideas are being included, everyone feels a part of that success. It's not one person's success, it's the team's success, right? So our opportunity then is to say, if we want the golden eggs, we've got to keep investing in the goose. So this is our last time for the golden egg opportunity. So as you were sharing, did anyone have a synergy golden opportunity that you'd like to share where you saw, wow, I tried something new, maybe they weren't even expecting it, or they wondered who I was because I'm doing something different, right? But did anyone have a little breakthrough, small or large, with some synergy last couple weeks? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken before, give them a new opportunity.
Rules you and I have, Shane.
All right, this is like, don't make eye contact with the facilitator, right? Did we have any in the office? Anyone? Sonia? Peggy? Kara? Any? Ruth? Any notice of synergy in the field? Anything improving, changing?
Well, we kind of
made a decision about a couple weeks ago, I guess, to just go all into co-construct with certain information. So that was kind of a result of some synergy.
Right. Because that's a synergistic tool. It's about getting us all under one platform where we can communicate and share information, right? So that we go forward. And it's been something strategically we've been working at, but that commitment is when you say, we're not going back, right? Did anyone have any breakthrough with co-construct where you're seeing maybe a benefit because you've used it?
Sure.
What do you see, Dave?
All kinds of benefits in it. One is a centralized information conduit. That's probably the biggest thing I've been dealing with. And how much more I've got to add to it because other people are also using it. So there's a down the pipe synergy
Right.
that has potential.
Right. When we invest, it helps
Yeah.
maybe not always us in that moment, but it's helping the rest of the team.
Once we all get in, it benefits all.
Right.
But when we don't all get in, everyone else doesn't get benefited.
Right.
So there's some stuff in that.
Potential energy, like.
It's
Yes.
investment. I like that. Okay. So Dave, would you say, since you're kind of speaking there, do you notice anyone that put something in co-construct that was helpful to you?
Well, it's a little bit loaded because my wife does most of the loading. Real information.
Well, hey, that's all right.
Yeah.
Looks like you get the golden egg.
Dave doesn't even know his password.
We spent an hour, probably 2 hours last night, just going through co-construct and going through all the lines on a couple different jobs and just noticing all the stuff that's been put in there.
Right.
And it was interesting because I had a meeting today with customers, with interior designers and stuff, and I could reference different things that I had picked up through our time. And so like, are you really sold on this sub? You know, asking the customer, and no, I'm not. And we had some other opportunities.
So actually, what we just did by Dave sharing, that's a celebration. Remember we talked about how important it is to celebrate? Little victories, whatever, but hey, wow, we got a benefit from a tool that we've been working at, and someone doing something that benefits then someone else on the team is building that platform for synergy, right? So we talked about how important it is to celebrate the little victories. That's the opportunity, right? So we got to start building that in. So Dave, thanks for sharing that, taking some leadership. So now we are coming to the whole climax of the 7 habits. We've been climbing from principles and tools, building from dependency to independence, but pushing beyond, because it's not about independence, it's interdependence, right? So we talked about when we have synergy, we're working well together. But how do we keep that going? How do we build the momentum so we don't fall back, right? And that's what habit 7 is sharpen the saw. So can someone in your own words, you know, Covey uses this term, sharpen the saw. What does that mean to you when you hear to sharpen your saw? Who's got it? Who'd like to put it in their own words?
You're going back and you're revisiting and you're checking yourself and your compliance with the 7 habits, and you're continuing to improve.
Okay, so you're going back, reviewing, building on that. What else, if you're sharpening the saw, what's the benefit to use a sharp saw versus a dull saw? Yes?
Working smarter, not harder.
There you go. Now, we're hard workers, there's no doubt about it, right? But we work very hard with a dull saw, right? And that simply wears us out. But it might be our comfort zone. So, well, I'm not getting this done, I'm just going to keep sawing harder and harder. But if you stop for a minute, sharpen the saw, now every stroke you take is a smarter, more productive stroke, right? So that's why Covey uses this term, sharpen the saw, is because resting is not a bad thing. Resting can actually be productive in making the next efforts you do more productive than if you just kept pushing yourself until you collapsed, right? We're not looking for that. We're looking for balance. We're looking for sustainability. We're not in a sprint. We're in a marathon, right? To make Fechtel the company that God made it to be, to have the reputation in the community, that's not going to be from a sprint. That's going to be from long-term building the reputation of who we are, right? So this is our opportunity now to look at how do we then keep everything sharper? How do we make everything more productive in applying these principles? So we can talk about sharpening our individual saw in the role that you play, and we're also going to talk about our collective saw in our teams and in the whole team. So let's take a first look at, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about stress, because that's a barrier, a roadblock to being able to be sharp, right? When you're stressed out. We're going to talk about these 4 dimensions then of being human. Covey talks about the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and social emotional. And then how do we then do this as a team? And then what can we do to build this into our culture? Now that we've been studying it, it's great to have head knowledge, but if we don't use it, we'll lose it, right? We want to get the benefit from it and put our actions together. So we've seen this model many, many times, right? Instead of waiting for crisis to force us to change, the proactive approach is what? Change before you have to, right? Now it's funny, I'm just going to, because that principle came from General Electric. And General Electric is really struggling because it stopped practicing and it changed before you have to. So even though you got the right principles, if you stop practicing, if your culture changes, then you're going to lose the benefit of what you had. So that was a Jack Welch thing. Unfortunately, that leader retired, and the leadership coming in didn't reinforce that. The culture actually lost track of what it's doing. So what we're going to have you do is first check in on where your stress level is. Now I know you're going to say, Jeff, I don't need a test to know that I have stress in my life, but sometimes being aware of what stress or how much stress or what is stressing you. So take one, pass it around, and what I'd like you to do is first do the front page which says stress test. And what you're going to do is you're going to take, if any of these events have happened in the last 90 days, okay, you're going to take the number and put it on number 2 on the blank. So if you've had a death of a spouse, heaven forbid, you put 100 points on the blank in column 2. So all the things that have happened to you in the last 90 days go in this column, and you're going to add this up, and it's supposed to give you kind of a general sense of how much stress is being placed on you. What load are you carrying? Now obviously this is not all-encompassing, but it's a sampling of things that may be stressing.
How do you describe number 7?
And number 7, marriage. If you are married and you've been married for 90 days, it's a stressor. There's benefits to marriage, but it's also a stressor.
It is.
Because you have to learn to listen to each other and work
But
together.
only if you've been married the last 90 days.
No, if you continue to be married, marriage has stresses built into it, but it has many benefits as well. But you have to recognize that it takes an investment in marriage.
That's not newlyweds.
What's the deal?
What's that?
Not newlyweds.
Huh?
That's not newlyweds. That's
It's not- if you have maintained marriage for the last 90 days, there is investment that you have to make in that to continue to make marriage work.
So you're saying if you're married,
Put it that number there.
put the number there.
Right.
And I
So
can
it
choose
doesn't
number
require
of
you to put
arguments.
Don't put it in
So
there.
number 7 is more stressful than number 9?
Well, the reconciliation actually has, in the short term, has greater benefits. There's some joy when there's things solved, and just
So
continue.
we should find
I find
something.
number 19, if your number of arguments go down, does that stresses you as much as if they go up?
This is from the Mental Health Council, so we're going to rely on some experts supposedly know
Oh,
some things about this.
my father's a psychologist, he doesn't put much in.
Change in sleeping habits. What if you don't ever sleep and then you actually do start getting some sleep? I don't see the stress in that one.
In general, when you change a habit, there is stress involved in any kind of change. So there's benefits, they're just saying there is stress when you change the way you're doing something.
On Christmas, it's within 90 days, but it's going that way instead of that way. Would that count as stress?
Well, if you feel that preparing for Christmas now is stressing you, you may put that down.
Oh, no, that's,
change the number of family get-togethers, that's just Christmas.
Yeah, just say a friend of yours, not
Changing
so then you can put probably say.
No, it's not 41.
Now, if you need a calculator to add this total up, that's a sign that you may be carrying considerable stress.
What's defined as a team?
Christmas.
Celebrate all the
I do need a calculator. But,
It's just for accuracy.
yeah, I just want to get it right.
See, if you stress that about Christmas coming, then you're on the
Minor violation of the law.
Hurricanes, they're not in here.
Yes, that's right. This is not the Florida version, this is a general version.
Oh,
That's
so
right.
for some people, that'd be changing residence.
And this is what then, how long a period?
Within the last 90 days.
90 days.
Yeah.
work conditions are always going to be coming.
I still disagree with your marriage one.
Well, that's going to cause
Well, that's a good
stress.
sign.
I think that our reconciliation points is what it's going for. I think he's picking a fight so he can make that.
Get more points if we fight.
I didn't hear you.
Only if you don't fight and you start fighting. If you do fight and you stop fighting, you...
You don't get any points.
Okay, so add up your points. The point we're trying to make here is sometimes we're aware of some stress, sometimes we're not aware of things that are stressors because we've gotten so used to it. It's kind of the old saying, you know, you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps right out. You put it in cold water and turn the burner up very slowly, right? Boil to death. So sometimes we get used to the stress we're in and don't realize it's still having an impact on us.
That's a warm.
Right, so now once you've completed the front sheet, you can flip it over, and now you're going to look and measure your coping with stress. That's your capacity to handle stress. You may have a lot of stress, but if you have great capacity to handle it, it may not have as much impact on you as someone who's struggling to cope with some of the stressors that they have. So look at the scale on the second page there. And 1 is almost always, all the way down to 5 is never. So a scale of 1 to 5. Now, if you find this interesting, we can provide extra copies if you'd like to share this at home or with others. that you wanna...
I found 4 interesting there. That's sort of a yes or no question, and you put in sometimes.
Well, that's right there. You can put it on the scale, however you think that fits.
Yeah, but
The key is that you can rely on them. So how often can you rely on them?
Does
okay.
that include a spouse?
A relative would be outside marriage. Yeah, so someone else, extended family. It says, do you have a support system basically around you?
Exercise, does sweating during work count?
What number do I have?
5.
5. Exercise to the point of perspiration at least twice a week.
Construction's
So
exercise.
it's good to do that, so you would put a 1 if it's almost always.
No, but if my work is what gets me the sweat.
Oh, okay. If you're seeing it as a exercise that gives you benefit, it's building strength, then I would count it. If it's draining you, then maybe overexertion.
Maybe comes off.
There are fringe benefits to construction.
I think you have to answer that one upside down.
Yeah, that's kind of a double negative, but yes. So if you smoke less than half a pack of cigarettes a day, then you would put a 1, and you're smoking less than a pack.
Well, I put a 0 there because I don't
You
smoke, period.
you may put zeros if you like, if you think you really, that this is a non-factor, that you are able to add benefit to you.
Well, you gotta change it halfway through.
I'm
There's
ha-
1 through 5.
If you've
I was
done ones, you're fine, that's the way it should be. If you want to put zeros, I'm accommodating. Okay, so generally 5 is not good, 1s are really good. So again, if you end up needing a calculator for this one, that's probably not a good sign. Almost always having fun with exercises like this, that's a good score as well.
Number 6, I can't talk to myself.
Okay, so if you're getting a number, we're just gonna like do just a quick check-in on the team here, because obviously we're interdependent, so what affects one person could also be affecting another. So on your stress test, how many got a score of 100 or less? Anyone less than 100, okay? So apparently not much stressing you, although there may be other factors that are not on this list, right? Now, of course, if you're engaged in a lot of different changes,
How could you
it may
do
be part of
that
the
if
job.
marriage is 53 and
I
you're
didn't count
married?
marriage as a stressor.
Don't cheat, fill in the thing. What he's saying is marriage is not marriage is an added load in life. It's not like, oh, it's a bad thing to be
Right.
pregnant. It's just an added load in life. Be honest.
We're talking about the stress.
So if you have less than 100, then we would say two things. Either you've really got life figured out, or you're really not being challenged. You're not fully engaged.
Well,
So,
a lot of these things
it's
are things
interesting-
that happen to you at seasons of life and times of life. They're not there. You need to be challenged. You shouldn't challenge yourself with a mortgage over $100,000 for the fun of it.
No. But what we're just saying is, in general, we have stressors. That's what we're just trying to say. Unless you're in retirement or something, life is full of stressors. That's what we're trying to get at.
I mean, I just had 2 kids leave for college.
That's right.
You know, son and daughter leaving home. That was within 90 days, so 29 points.
Now, what was interesting is when I first took this test, believe it or not, I scored 450 on this test. But my lifestyle, I was working as a consultant, traveling to Detroit to work with General Motors and Ford. So I had a lot of constant changes in my life, from eating, sleeping, scheduling, homework. A lot of things were challenging me. But the benefit that I had, the reason I could maintain it, was because my coping with stress score was pretty manageable. It was pretty low, right? So the indicator here, though, is if you've got higher stress and you have a high coping stress problem, now you've got a problem, right? So you just want to say, do I have a balance of my capacity to handle the stressors that I'm in? If you don't, that's where the symptoms start to play out. You start to see the symptoms of stress. Now, this is just for fun, but I thought this might be a humorous way of seeing that sometimes you can tell when people are stressed. You might see it in their face or their behavior. You might recognize yourself on this picture. But the point is, stress can show up in a lot of different ways. So the point is, if you ignore stress that you're under, you will probably pay a consequence. It's something that we have to be aware of. We have to find a way to be able to manage the stresses in our lives. Because if we're going to keep a sharp saw, right? Stress dulls the saw. It drains the battery. So you're going to see kind of a balancing act here. We have to manage the things that drain us in our lives with things that are energizing, right? If you have lots of draining, but you don't have things energizing you, what's going to happen to your scale? It's going to tip to the negative, right? And you're going to start seeing the symptoms, not only of stress physically, right, where you may be tired, having health problems and so on, but the treadmill. You can have a mental stress, right, where the treadmill just gets you, you're not being challenged, you're feeling you're in a rut, right? That can drain you. If you spiritually don't have the spiritual relationship, the spiritual habits going, you can feel hopeless. That's a very dangerous place. And as you guys have been praying for our ministry and Character GPS, we deal with a lot of kids that have reached hopelessness at a very early age. And thus they become desperate and they start finding escapes from the hopelessness that they might be facing. And then, of course, social emotional is conflict. Conflict can drain the battery, right? So think for a moment, what do you have going on? Do you have anything physically that is stressing your body and draining the energy in your body? Do you have anything that's going on with the treadmill where you feel like you're caught in a rut? What activity, what's the habit that's causing that? Now it could be watching television at night and as Tom was sharing, you know, eating junk food while you're watching, that could be a bad rut to be in, right? Hopelessness, is there something that is robbing your sense that God is in your life, that you're connected to a power of the universe to help you to know what you need to do with your life, to have hope? And then in conflict, is there relationships that are constantly draining you? Are there clients that, even Dave said for a season, you may have a long season with some of our clients. Are those draining? So just for a moment, just kind of do an inventory. Is there anything that's pulling you down? What's some of the load that you maybe responded to some of the questions on there? Because we need to find whatever is on the draining side, we've got to find an equal or greater side than to the energizing, right? Because if we don't, what happens to a long time where we are on the drain side, right? If we're out of balance for a long time, there will be serious consequences. Okay? So as you're kind of just thinking through that, we are wanting then to invest in habit 7 is to really say, we may be able to eliminate, reduce some of these, but some of them, that's just part of life, right? So we've got to find ways to find balance by finding ways to energize ourselves and each other. We did a workshop with a bunch of nurses and caregivers. It's a burnout job. You're doing, especially working with Alzheimer's patients and stuff, very challenging. So the turnover rate with the nursing groups we worked with was just huge. And you could see that these very giving people were having health problems and stuff because they were just the life was being drained out of them. So we worked with them to say, how can you energize each other as a team? How can we encourage each other, celebrate and do things? And it was amazing. Within 1 month, we took a team that was demoralized and we built a team that was starting to have fun, where they could support and encourage each other, rather than feeling like it's all on my shoulders and I'm all isolated and I'm suffering in silence. They were able to support each other and build a culture, and the turnover rate reduced from 60% in 1 month to sustained 5%. A huge difference, because people started to find a way to make balance in the work that they were doing. So this is the opportunity is to do it. So Covey says we've got to look then at your 4 dimensions. What are your human needs? You've got to be aware of that, right? So the 4 areas, and you got this in your packet there, we have obviously physical needs, like exercise, sleep, and diet. We have mental needs, the ability to feel like we're being challenged, we're learning, we're not stagnant, we're solving problems rather than problems continuing to burden us, right? We feel we have power over some of our problems. We can do it, right? Social emotional, fun, sharing relationships, right, that are positive. And then spiritual, that we have a sense of that spiritual connection, right? That we have a purpose. It's not just random. We're not just in a world that is going to end, and that's the end of it, right? So these 4 areas. Now what's interesting, Covey, in the 7 Habits workshop, tackles physical in this order, because I think people can relate to physical challenges first. But my experience is been involved in this program for over 20 years and dealing with people, is when you focus just on physical, like, okay, I'm going to eat better, I'm going to sleep better, I'm going to diet better, people have a hard time changing these habits if they're just trying to do it in their own strength. And what I find is if you actually turn this inside out, if you focus on the spiritual first, and then work on your relationships with God and others, and work then on being mentally in a positive mindset, the physical changes become much easier. You have a sense, I can do it. We have a support system, right? You're not struggling. So we're going to kind of turn this inside out. And I realize this with relationships. You know, the old kind of thing with dating, you know, there's a physical attraction, and then you talk to somebody, and you start to find you have some things in common, and then you social emotional start to build connections, and then you might get to the spiritual core. But what's happened in our culture is there's such an emphasis on the physical presence and appearance and so on, that some people struggle to get to a spiritual core. And that's why in our culture we are so caught up with, you know, you got to look good, you got to have all the right stuff to, you know, have on the outside. The physical is so important that we don't get a spiritual core. And so when we coach young people, when we coach couples, for instance, we stress is, hey, if you're going to date, you want to find a relationship, start with a spiritual core. Meet people doing things that you think are in alignment to your spiritual perspective, right? And when you find people that are spiritually alike, of course we call this evenly yoked, remember the Bible, then you build an emotional connection to them, and then you get to know them mentally, sharing ideas, and then the physical becomes more natural. And you build lasting relationships that work between men and women and so on, right? So it's the inside-out approach, just like we talked before. Be, do, have, right? If you start more with spiritual core, you're going to have a greater chance of building these relationships. Well, the truth is, obviously with yourself, if you are tuned into your spiritual needs first, everything else is going to fall in line. Does that make sense? I mean, healthy relationships, and then sharing with people, and then physically being in the presence, not isolated. Unfortunately, again, we have a lot of people in our culture, old and young, that become isolated, right? So they rely on virtual environments, like the internet, and they start having all sorts of problems because they don't know, they're not building real present relationships, right? To really meet long-term needs. So this is the opportunity. So if we look at a spiritual base, well, we know that there's some very specific teachings, right? In Matthew, it talks about having spiritual rest and renewal is essential to the way we're designed, right? If you ignore that spiritual renewal need, then you're going to keep trying to do things and you're going to burn out because we can't do it on our own energy, right? Or I love Psalm 23, right? Make me to lie down in green pastures, leadeth me beside still waters. Aren't there days that sounds really good? But we actually have them all around us. There are spiritual waters that are flowing between people if you're willing to build them, right? There are pastures that are green when we have a sense of, you know, collaboration and synergy, that it's enjoyable to work together rather than just a drain. So we got to get our spiritual mindset in place first if we're going to have a sharp saw, right? So, the Moses trap. Lord, don't ask me to do things because I don't think I have the ability. Well, God doesn't really care about your ability. He wants more your availability, right? Make yourself available to do spiritual things. And then, you know, if you prove your dependability, then the Lord will increase your capability, right? So this is kind of the formula of living a spiritually driven life, right? Is don't worry what you don't have, right? Step up and start developing your talents, and God will expand what you think you can't do into things that you can do, right? So, as this is kind of a whole discipleship approach, but basically it's saying is, if we build our spiritual strength, so if you are building habits where you're praying, you're seeking the Word, you're in worship, you're serving, you're sharing faith with others, and then you're living this lifestyle, this is a way to develop, right, and grow your spiritual base. Well, what's the alternative if you don't do that? If you're not growing, what's the opposite? Slippery slope. You're declining, right? Your spiritual muscles get flabby, and you start falling into the traps of this world, where there can be selfishness and negativity, and then all the negative things that goes along with it, right? So we are either a light, right? We're part of the solution, or we're part of the problem. So, whole other toolkit for that, but this is generally the staircase to heaven, so to speak, is you developing your spiritual habits, okay? So, if we understand that you have spiritual habits, think about going back to your balance sheet there, right? Is there anything that you can write in there on the right side now of your balance sheet? Go back a few pages to your balance. And under spiritual habits, okay, right after your, right up here. Oh,
I do have one.
that would help. I've got to pass it out to you. I've got so many good tools for you. There you go. Send that around if you would. So, on the sheet here, we're going to start filling in. What are some things that spiritually that you could do? So wherever you think you are on building your spiritual base, just look at the next step. If I'm doing these things, what's the next step? That's always this idea of continuous improvement. What's the next step where I could maybe be spending more time? So maybe you're doing great in your spiritual habits, prayer, worship, and so on, but maybe you haven't found a ministering servant, right, where you're giving of your talents. So that might be your next step. Find what you enjoy doing, what you love to do, and find a spiritual way to help others. Or evangelize. Do you have someone around you that's hurting? And you know they're hurting, but you're kind of afraid, well, I'm kind of afraid to talk to them in the Moses thing because I'm not sure I'm really qualified to talk about faith or whatever, but maybe they need some hope. And you might be that source of hope. Or spirit-led living. Are you living this lifestyle of synergy of 2 or 3 gathered, right? So whatever you could do, plug in something on that right side that you think could help under spiritual. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go to the next one as you're writing that down. And this is the social emotional. This one people often are challenged with, right? Because we can have some positive relationships in our life and we have some negative relationships in our life. And sometimes we have a hard time navigating through this, right? But if you understand what are human beings' emotional needs, your needs and the needs of others, you have an opportunity now to tune in to this emotional dimension, the way, again, we're wired. So this really neat tool called the 7 Desires of the Heart basically says, okay, and again, this is generalization, that there are 7 kinds of emotional needs that we have, okay? There's a need to be heard and understood. Many people don't have it. So when they are struggling, what do they want? They want to be understood, right? So they talk and talk and talk. They're not willing to listen to someone else because they're so desperate for someone to understand them, right? The human need to be understood. Now, we can get these needs met by God, right? So I have this column here. But do you have someone in your life, right, that feeds you, someone that you kind of have a relationship with, a godly person that you feel understands you? That you've got this best friend or confidant or, you know, marriage partner, whoever it is, someone or multiple people that feeds you. Now, who do you provide this emotional support? So someone is kind of, they know that you're a go-to person. When they need to feel understood, they're struggling, they know that they can talk to you, right? Because you've built that trust with them. And then the goal is, do you have anyone, if you've written in the general names of people that you either are given to or give to, do you have anyone that you have a name in both places? That's a win-win, right? So if you've got someone in both places, right, that's a win-win relationship. That's a sustainable, that's a best friend, a confidant, a mate. So maybe when Dave was talking about his marriage, he's really happy with his marriage because he's got a win-win going. Now, maybe he's got it in one area, but maybe not at all, right? So that's why we kind of do an inventory. So the next one is to be safe, okay? Now, safe can be both physical safety and emotional safety, right? So people that need physical safety might feel that they're being, someone could attack them, someone, in their home or whatever. They feel a sense of insecurity. Now, in this world with terrorism, you can see why safety becomes a bigger. People don't know. I'm going to be out in some sporting event, and some terrorist going to attack us. Our safety has been challenged by some of the things happening. But emotional safety is even more important because it happens on a daily basis, right? When you don't feel emotionally safe, you can't be honest with someone because if I tell them how I feel, they're going to get upset, right? So I don't feel that I can talk through issues with them. That's huge, right? So again, who provides that safety to you, and who is it that you maybe provide that safety to others? And if you've got someone in both boxes, then you've got a win-win relationship. Third one is to be affirmed. Everyone needs to feel that they're valuable, right? And we've shared with you that a lot of the kids that we work with who are struggling don't think that they're priceless, that they were made priceless. People told them that they're not worth much, right? So if you don't feel affirmed, you don't feel your value, right? It leads to emotional insecurity. And then you're vulnerable to a lot of things. So who is it that you affirm, and who affirms you? Who lets you know, just reminds you, you're priceless, you were made that way, right? But sometimes we still need someone to remind us that we're that way. So then who do you have a win-win with that? Fourth one is to be blessed. So people provide grace and favor and forgiveness, right? We're not perfect, right? So we all need a little bit of grace, right? God provides that if we're willing to receive it. But do you give forgiveness and grace to others? Are you graceful when people have made a mistake? You're not hard on them, right? You're forgiving. You say, I understand. I know your intentions were good, right? And you're able to show that mercy, and where they can feel, oh, okay, it's okay, right? Not going to pay a price. I'm not going to get beat up for this, right? And then who provides that to you? Who gives you that unconditional love? That even when you mess up, you're still loved. Now, of course, a win-win would mean that you're doing great on the emotional bank account, right? You're making good deposits, and they're making good deposits with you, so as life happens, nothing's going bankrupt, right? We're doing good. All right, number 5, to be touched. Okay, people need physical touch. It's so important. But some people are not touchy-feely, right? It's just kind of the way they're raised. But there's an emotional price they pay when they're not able to have human contact. Now, you may have seen some years ago that there was a case of a premature baby in Australia that was born, and they had it in the incubator. They're trying to keep this baby alive, and the mother's anxious, and the baby heartbeat stops. And the mother is then told, and she's so in grief, said, please, please bring the baby to me. Bring my baby to me. And of course, hospital procedures don't always allow this to happen, but they just did it. And they brought the baby and laid the baby on her chest. And the baby resuscitated. And the heart started beating again. Just human touch is so important. And that's why you see in the Bible, Jesus touched people. It wasn't just saying you're forgiven. There was a need to touch. And in some cases with a woman who was hemorrhaging, when touched just his cloak, the power went out of Jesus into that person, right? There's a power in our ability when we are willing to give someone a hug, give someone a pat on the back, whatever's appropriate, right? But sometimes people need to be touched, right? So, who is it that you provide that to? Who gives you some of that, right? Every once in a while we need a hug. I make sure my wife gets a hug every day. She deserves it, but that's my pleasure, right? Now, to be chosen. Remember growing up and they choose sides for kickball or something? If you were one of those that didn't get chosen till the end, you kind of felt bad, right? It's nice to feel chosen, right? And with your spouse, it's important that you don't just choose them once. You choose them every day, right? You say to your spouse, if I had to do all over again, I would choose you again. Whew. what? You feel good, right? You feel good about that, right? So, who is it that you give that to, and who gives that reaffirmation that they would still choose you today, right? That's a win-win if you got it going both ways. To be included. And we call that bullying today, when you exclude people from stuff, right? Because it can be really hurtful. You ever been excluded, left out, something that you thought you should be a part of? You're on the outside. That's why the holidays are so tough, because often people get isolated, get left out. So Debbie and I, we've made a habit now. We go to a nursing home, a assisted care, where people, really can't take care of themselves. And Debbie is this great piano player, and so I do the kind of sing-along part, kind of the ham on the second side of the. But we go in, we bring cheer to these seniors that have been kind of abandoned and forgotten about on Christmas, right? So we try to let them know that they're being included, that Christmas is for them too. Even though they've lived a productive life, it's not like all of a sudden now you're a throwaway, you're still priceless. So if you had a minute to fill this out, take a minute and just